I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. It is allergy season, and we are so fortunate to be joined by a very experienced expert in this, Dr. Darin Ingels, a naturopathic doctor in California. Darin, great to see you again.
Oh, always nice to see you, Rob. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, your superpowers first came to our attention for all the great work you do for Lyme disease prevention and treatment and reversal, and you've made a huge difference in the lives of my patients. So I wanted to stop and thank you for that.
Oh, always my pleasure.
Well, this is going to be really exciting. I got a bunch of questions I want to ask you about allergies, but let's set the stage. Is this part of the toolkit of all gifted naturopaths? Is this an area of extra interest to you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's something that I do is a little bit different than perhaps what my other naturopathic colleagues do, and really even other functional medicine practitioners. I was very fortunate coming out of residency to have done extensive training with the American Academy of Environmental Medicine.
Mm,
And a heavy focus in that organization is really looking at all the different triggers, in people's lives that set off their immune system. And of course, allergies are a big part of that. So I got to train with, doctors that practiced for 30, 40 years, had a lot of clinical experience on identifying, different types of allergens, different ways of testing that are beyond what a conventional, allergist might do, and then learning about different types of immunotherapy to help retrain someone's immune system to become more tolerant to these things that bother them. The conventional medical wisdom is you go to the allergist, they do skin prick testing or blood testing, they find out you're allergic to dust or ragweed or, dogs.
mhm.
And then, you would go in every week and you would get shots to help desensitize you against, whatever that allergen might be, with the hope that over time, you can be around that allergen and it doesn't set off your symptoms. But, I learned that there's a lot of other ways, and we can get into the weeds of that a little bit later, about other types of immunotherapy that don't involve shots. That people can do at home, I think are much safer and clinically very effective. So I was very blessed to have that education very early in my career, and that's really become a foundation of our practice today of, really helping patients identify the different things in their lives that kind of irritate their immune system, and then find those strategies to get their immune system under better control.
Mm. Well, this is terrific. I'm really excited to learn about this, and I thank our audience for joining us. I think they're going to be gladdened to know that there's a different way, because I've seen folks have a lot of neat changes, but they have to go all in with the conventional route. There's big safety considerations, big decision making there, and then there's just a hassle factor. So
Right.
yeah, so let's get to it. And I guess because so many people are interested in mast cells now, I mean, does the stability of the mast cells or not tie into? I've been so fascinated to learn the degree to which we're freaked out and unstable, or chill and stable, because kind of mirrored by our mast cells. So
Right.
I don't know if they're salient to today's discussion, but if you just lay it out for us, what's going on with allergies, and what are these other options? I think this is going to be great.
Yeah, I think when people think of allergies, they think of hay fever, right? They think of the itchy eyes and the runny nose and the sneezing. And that certainly is part of an allergy complex. We call this, and we learned this in medical school as, they call it the atopic triad, which means it usually starts with eczema, which often is sort of an allergic skin condition. And then it develops to allergic rhinitis, which is the runny nose and the sneezing. And then that can progress into asthma. And it all, at the end of the day, again, it kind of comes back to what you were talking about with mast cells. Mast cells are sort of the primary cells in the body that respond to these different allergens. And, we know about this chemical called histamine. Histamine is a chemical that triggers a lot of the symptoms that people experience when they get, different types of allergies. But, inside a mast cell, there's over 200 chemicals. Histamine's one of them. So we got this other 199 plus, that do various things to the body. And it's kind of interesting, when you read American journals about allergy, the definition is very strict. It is very much IgE, immunoglobulin E, which is a very specific kind of antibody that again binds to mast cells that sets off that cascade of events. But if you read European journals, there's a much broader understanding of allergy that it's not all IgE. I think we get into this sort of semantic discussion about what is allergy, and if we broaden it to say it's any symptom that's a reaction to something that you're being exposed to. So whether it's IgE or IgG, or maybe it's T cell mediated, there are probably numerous mechanisms involved that set off, we'll call it allergy like symptoms. And when coming back to the mast cell discussion, mast cells are found all throughout your body. So outside of normal hay fever, people when they have, we'll call it an allergic reaction, it might be gastrointestinal, it might be in their skin, it might be in their brain. I have a colleague who's an MD PhD allergist. His name's Dr. Theorides, and he's published extensively on kids with autism that they have a lot more mast cells in and around their brain. So when they get this mast cell activation or even allergy, they don't get hay fever. They get purely neurological symptoms. So
Mhm.
if you're a parent and you have a child that's having behavior issues, sleep disturbances, cognitive issues, they're not doing well in school, they're very moody, would you think at all that maybe it's an allergy that's affecting your child? No. I mean, usually parents are, taking their kid to the child psychiatrist or behavioral therapist to try and deal with it that way without understanding that, perhaps there's a chemical thing going on in the brain that's triggering these neurological symptoms. And I see a lot of kids with autism in my practice, and kind of across the board, we find that when we get their immune system more less hyperreactive,
Mhm.
that's a double negative there, but when we get their immune system online, when we stop this overreaction, at the end of the day, all allergies are really an overreaction of the immune system. The
Mhm.
immune system is reacting to something that's a normal part of your world. Why are
Mhm.
some people allergic to dogs or cats and other people aren't? Why are some people allergic to pollen and other people aren't? There's something in the immune system that's lost tolerance to that specific allergen, and therefore they have this overreaction. So again, what we're really trying to do is help identify what those triggers are, and then again find ways that we can modulate the immune system to turn off that reaction.
Right on. It's such a classic example of functional and natural medicine. It's root cause. That's what I'm hearing. So,
Well, and that's what I kind of love about this work is that, there's so many things you can do to mitigate symptoms. You can take your over-the-counter antihistamines like Zyrtec and Allegra, and then we've got mast cell inhibitors like cromolyn sodium and ketotifen. And there's a lot of natural things too, vitamin C and nettles and quercetin. And I mean, they all can help manage
mhm.
symptoms, but they don't ultimately fix the problem.
Mhm.
So I think the beauty of immunotherapy is that we have an opportunity that we can, I mean, we rarely use the C word in medicine, but we can cure these problems. We can get people to a point where these things no longer bother them. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's why people like your and my work. So, what are next steps people take? At the end, we'll talk about how people can find you and learn about this. But then the neat part during the podcast is just so how does this work stepwise? How do people determine this, and what plays out for a person who goes down this path?
Yeah, I think, the first step is trying to help identify what your triggers are. And honestly, the history tells us a lot about what potentially can bother people. If you are a pollen allergic person, pollen, no matter where you live in the world, has a season.
Mhm.
There's nowhere where everything pollinates, year round. Trees have a season, grass has a season, weeds have a season. So again, if you tell me, hey, every April, May, I get really itchy and sneezy and congested. Okay, you've just told me that you're allergic to tree pollen. If you tell me, at least in the United States, every fall, around Labor Day, again, I get the similar symptoms. Well, that's the peak of weeds or ragweed season. If you tell me, my symptoms get worse in the winter time, Well, that's usually dust allergy because when your house is closed up and heat's on, that generates a lot of dust. So, your history tells us a lot about what might be bothering you. We know that pollen pollinates in the morning. Pollen people usually feel worse in the morning. Mold sporulates in the evening. Mold patients will usually tell you that when the evening rolls around, they feel more congested, they feel more head pressure, whatever the symptoms might be. So, the time of day, the time of year, all that information is really helpful to share with your practitioner because, again, gives us clues to what's bothering you. Now, beyond that, again, we've got various ways that we can test people. I mean, you can go down the conventional route and you can do skin prick testing or you can do blood testing to try and see if there is that kind of IgE reaction. And again, that can be very helpful for a lot of allergens. But, you look at mold as an example. Mold classically is not IgE. There's usually other mechanisms involved. So, I mean, I used to live in Connecticut, which is much more moldy than where I live now in California. And, people would have the experience when it rains, when I get into a damp environment, if I go into a basement, I feel, again, nasal congestion, chest congestion, head pressure, ear ringing. You've just told me that you have mold allergy, but they would go to the allergist and get tested, and everything came back completely normal. So it doesn't tell you that you don't have mold allergy. It just tells you it's not IgE. It's just not that immune mechanism involved. So, we found other various ways to test people that don't involve because they're the conventional skin prick testing or RAS testing. You can do skin patch testing, where you basically put the antigen on a patch and it stays on your back for 3 days, and that picks up these delayed kind of reactions. We use something in our office that's a little bit controversial, but we found it very useful called electrodermal screening, which is a non-invasive way to help pick up, especially a lot of these non-IgE reactions. And I was very, very skeptical about this when I came out of practice. Out of residency, I moved to Connecticut to join a practice, and I worked with a doctor who did this for 30 years very successfully. And he taught me how to do it. So we've been using that in our practice. And again, I just found it to be a very useful tool in conjunction with all these other ways that we have to help determine people's allergies. So, once we find out, what those things are, then we can start doing some type of immunotherapy. And there's three, well, I should say there's four major types of immunotherapy out there, just so the audience knows. If you have true anaphylactic reactions, if you eat a peanut and your face swells, you can't breathe, and it's very dangerous. That's not the kind of thing I deal with. I punt those off to the allergist just because of the nature of what that allergy can do. There is something called oral immunotherapy, where there are clinics around the world where if you were allergic to peanuts, they would give you a small amount of peanut every day. So you have to go to the office, you have to sit there for a long time while they build up to make sure you don't have a serious reaction. And the idea is, again, by introducing it slowly over time, it's building your immune tolerance, and then you get to a steady state where it doesn't set you off in that kind of reaction anymore. And the nice thing is, again, it can help prevent a very serious life-threatening reaction. The downside is it's very labor intensive. You're in the clinic a lot, building up your tolerance. And then once you get to that tolerance point, you have to eat that every single day for the rest of your life to maintain the tolerance. So in
Wow.
this case, it doesn't necessarily cure the allergy, but it definitely can help protect you against a serious life-threatening event.
Mhm.
The more conventional thing, what allergists do, is called subcutaneous immunotherapy. That's called allergy shots. So again, if they find out you're allergic to, different types of pollen or mold or dust, you would go in every single week and they would give you an injection of these allergens. And again, you have to sit in their office for 30 minutes after you get the shot to make sure you don't have any adverse reaction. And then after about 3 months of doing weekly shots, then they start backing off depending on your response to maybe every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, once a month. And then the goal is to get you down to once a month. And then that could go on for many, many years. So, the good news is this is very conventional. Insurance pays for it. It can help, reduce people's allergy symptoms. Again, I think the pitfall of that is that, again, you just have to commit to going to the allergist every week for many months, and then you're going to be in therapy for many years, going to the allergist office. And again, it's only going to treat the IgE mediated reactions. But, it's out there and it's common. Beyond that, I talked a little bit about sublingual immunotherapy. So, sublingual immunotherapy, again, is what I learned from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. And the idea is very much the same as doing allergy shots. The difference is you don't inject it. These are drops that you can put under your tongue. So, what's cool about it is that it gives the patient the freedom to do it at home. You don't have to go to the doctor's office. There's no risk of anaphylaxis. I've done an extensive literature search, and I can only find 3 cases that have ever been reported of someone that had an anaphylactic reaction to sublingual immunotherapy. In all 3 cases, it was related to pollen being in the bottle, but I mean that's 3 cases out of millions and millions of doses. So
Hmm.
I've personally never seen it in my own practice, but it's been out there reported. But again, relative to allergy shots that has a 1 to 2% chance of having an anaphylactic reaction, this would be 0.0001%. So, I like the convenience of being able to do it at home. And plus, the fact that we can test for so many other different things, allergists will test for conventional allergies, mold, pollen, dust, animal danders, cockroach, things like that. But what if you're allergic to chemicals? What if you get around petroleum and it bothers you, or chlorine bothers you? And so we will actually start looking at other things out there in the environment that can set off people's immune system that an allergist would never even look at. But they are immune triggers for people. I mean, I think chlorine is probably one of the most common things I see. Summertime rolls around, kids want to go swimming in the pool, and most pools are heavily chlorinated. And they find out that they cause breathing problems, they cause skin reactions. And what, you're going to tell your kid they can't ever go to a pool again? Well, no, we can actually test them, find out if they're sensitive to chlorine. And if so, we can desensitize them to chlorine much in the same way we do any other allergen. So this ability to, again, to look at sort of unconventional triggers, again, opens up the doors to all these different things that affect people. And we've even found in our practice that some people even react to their own internal chemistry. I learned from an environmental medicine doctor, again, very early in my career about progesterone allergy. Again, I thought it was kind of the kookiest thing I'd ever heard about. I'm like, why on earth would anyone react to progesterone? And again, I can tell you now, 26 years later, that it's a common thing we see in a lot of women that are having PMS and irregular cycles and fertility issues. Why does it happen? I don't know. I can tell you though that when we desensitize people against that, their period gets better, the PMS gets better. Just a quick case study. I had a patient that I saw back when I lived in Connecticut, and he was a bigwig at NBC, and he had a very long history of depression. And we had tested him. We found out he was actually reacting to his own serotonin. And again, there's a handful of studies out there about serotonin allergy. Again, it doesn't make any sense, right? Why would your body react to serotonin? And we tested him and treated him. 3 days after starting immunotherapy with serotonin, his depression completely went away after
Mm.
20 plus years.
Remarkable. Yeah.
So there was clearly something in his immune system that's interfering with the normal function of serotonin that was affecting his brain. I wish there was more people out there doing research on this kind of stuff. I think the reality is there's no money in it. We make antihistamines, we don't make anti-serotonin drugs for
Hmm.
obvious reasons.
Hmm.
So yeah, but the sublingual immunotherapy again gives us a lot of freedom to treat, we'll say unconventional triggers, unconventional allergies. So sublingual immunotherapy is very easy. This is basically the drops are made up in our office or whoever environmental medicine doctor you might be working with. And again, we give it to you. You administer it at home. The dose is anywhere from 1 drop a day to 1 drop 3 times a day. It goes right underneath your tongue. They taste like water. It's very safe. Again, if you go into PubMed, which is the big online medical database, and you search for sublingual immunotherapy, you'll find there's over 1,000 studies on this. This is a very well-researched treatment. It's highly used throughout the world, not so much in the United States, but in Europe, it's very heavily used. There was a study done out of France looking just at the economics of it. They found that sublingual immunotherapy was a quarter of the cost of allergy shots.
Hmm.
So you kind of say, well, gosh, why wouldn't we be doing it here? And well, allergists get paid to do allergy shots. They don't get paid to give you drops under your tongue. So
Hmm.
honestly, there's no financial impetus to get them to move to change
Hmm.
that.
Mhm.
But when you look at the research on sublingual immunotherapy, clinically highly effective, high compliance, again, very safe. They've done studies in children, they've done study in adults. Again, it's so well researched that it's kind of a shock that we don't use more of it in the US. The American Academy of Asthma, Allergy, and Immunology, which is the big allergy group in this country, they did write a position paper about 20 years ago about sublingual immunotherapy and their argument of why they don't recommend it. When you look at the studies on sublingual immunotherapy, the dose that's used varies a lot. There is a 10,000 fold difference between the highest dose and the lowest dose. So basically, what they said is look, there's such a wide range. We don't know what dose people need. However, it almost didn't matter. The higher doses worked better, but even at the low doses, it still worked. So again, there's some political thing that I don't completely understand of why we haven't completely embraced it. But again, it is something that is well researched. It's been around for over 100 years. It's nothing new. But again, my clinical experience is that it it works generally very quickly for people to help start to get control of their allergy symptoms. So that's sublingual immunotherapy. And then the fourth one is called LDA, or low dose allergy therapy. And LDA was developed by an ENT surgeon in the UK back in the 1960s. He basically took allergy extracts that allergists were using at the time and diluted it further than what they were using. And then he mixed it with an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. And this enzyme is found in your white blood cells. It's a normal human enzyme. But he found that enzyme modulates whatever you mix it with. So LDA now is made by a pharmacy. There are set mixes. There's two different food mixes that have the same number of foods in differing concentrations. There's an inhalant mix that has mold and pollen and cat and dust and dog and feather and pretty much anything you breathe in. And then there's a chemical mix that has just a handful of different chemicals in it. And with LDA, what's kind of neat is that there really is no testing involved. You can do testing, but you don't have to. Because the idea is that if there's 3 or 4 foods that bother you, and those 3 or 4 foods are in the LDA mix, we're covering the bases. And for everything else in the mix, who cares? You're not sensitive anyway, so having it in there isn't going to be a problem. So a
Mhm.
lot of people like LDA because you don't have to do any testing. It's just based on your clinical history. If we think you have food sensitivities, we give you the food mix. If you've got environmental allergies, we give you the inhalant mix. And if you seem chemically sensitive, we give you the chemical mix. And generally, we just give people all three anyway, because sometimes people don't really know what's setting them off. And with
Mhm.
LDA, it's taken every 7 weeks. So it's not something you have to do every day. The way they teach LDA is to do it as an intradermal injection. It is a little shot, it's a little bit different than a regular allergy shot.
Mhm.
We've actually been doing it under the tongue. And if you look at the way immunotherapy works as a whole, it works through cells called dendritic cells, which are part of our immune system. And these are the cells that basically convey information to other parts of your immune system. So it just so happens that your skin and the inside of your mouth are very rich in dendritic cells. So I think the mechanism's the same, and that's kind of been our clinical experience. So we don't really do much of the intradermal injection anymore. We found that under the tongue works quite well for people, and the shot does sting a little bit when you get it, and people don't generally like that. So under the tongue works just as well. So again, it's every 7 weeks. It's not every day. It's much more dilute than what you're doing with even sublingual immunotherapy. So conventional allergists, when you do allergy shots, the dilution they give you is 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000 of the extract. When we're doing sublingual immunotherapy, we're anywhere from 1 to 100 up to about 1 to 60,000. And LDA is probably 1 to 10 million, 1 to 100 million. So
Mm.
for people who are really sensitive, have some people that can't even tolerate sublingual immunotherapy very well, LDA is a really nice option. So the conversation's always like, what mean I mean the end game is the same, is that we're just trying to improve your immune tolerance. So whether you do conventional allergy shots, sublingual immunotherapy, LDA, the goal is really the same. And
Mm.
when I sit down with my patients, it's just a conversation of what method do we think is going to be best suited for you based on your lifestyle, your economics, all of that stuff. Unfortunately, sublingual immunotherapy, LDA, insurance doesn't reimburse, as far as I know. It's an out of pocket expense. And so allergy shots, again, insurance, if you have insurance, will typically pay for. So, people just need to be prepared that if you're going to do anything outside of that, it is an out-of-pocket expense. But again, it's not, I think, horribly expensive for most people. And again, it can be an effective way to get allergies under control.
And with the last two, did they hit an endpoint where they don't need maintenance, or is there a similar trend to the maintenance you described with the
Yeah.
other
So when
therapies?
you look at the research on sublingual immunotherapy, I mean, if you go to get allergy shots, they will tell you it can be anywhere from 5 to 9 years of treatment. Sublingual immunotherapy is usually 3 to 5.
Mhm.
So, all immunotherapy is long term. Sublingual, I think because it's the daily dose, that constant reminder of the immune system, I think pushes the immune system a little faster. So, yeah, the goal is to get to a point where you don't need that at all. But it is a long-term treatment. And LDA is kind of the same. I mean, I tell people 3 to 5 years is normal. Now, I've had some people that it's happened much faster. I think, anyone in the allergy world is like, we want to get you through kind of an entire year of being symptom free, particularly if you have environmental allergies. So, with food it's a little different. If there's foods that are bothering you, you can control that. You control what you put in your mouth. You can't control the weather. So, depending on where you live in the world, if you live in a high pollen area or a high mold area, you're going to have that ongoing exposure. So we're trying to retrain your immune system while you have exposure. And the best way I can kind of equate it, it's like, filling up a bathtub and draining at the same time. Which process can we get to go faster? If we can drain it faster than it fills up, we're good. If it fills faster than we can drain, it overflows and we have a problem. So, when there's competition with the immune system, it can take longer. Now, I've had people, again, who are highly mold sensitive and they go to a dry, arid climate like Arizona. Well, it's probably going to be faster to desensitize them because now they don't have all that outdoor mold that they're constantly getting exposed to, like they did if they lived in the central part of the country where it gets humid and it rains more. So sometimes changing the environment can help that a little bit, but it is a long game and people need to know going into that.
And do they have to be in physical geographic proximity to somebody to, it sounds like these aren't things that, I mean, these are things that require an office and some expertise and,
Well, in
et
our
cetera.
clinic, because of the type of methods we use, we don't necessarily have to have people in person. I work with people all over the country, and there are ways that we can help evaluate
Hmm.
them without them necessarily being in the office.
Oh,
Um,
remarkable.
so we try
Including
to
the testing?
coordinate with the testing. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
So
yeah,
cool.
yeah, we actually have it set up that, yeah, people can send us mouth swabs
Mhm.
and we can use that as a way to help evaluate some of their sensitivities. And then again, we'll try and coordinate with their local doctor again if they need allergy testing. In that way, that's something that they can do local. So again, we try to coordinate with their local healthcare team as much as possible. But yeah, if people for any reason can't visit us in our office, there are ways that we can still help figure out what's bothering them.
Hmm. Awesome. It
Yeah,
just
and if they're
sounds
doing
liberating.
LDA, it's even better because there's no testing involved anyway. So LDA, it's really, we get the history. We determine, yeah, you're a good candidate for this. And we did this program briefly out of our office last year where I had people coming really just for LDA and nothing else. And
Mhm.
again, it's really just getting a history. Yep, you qualify. You seem to have enough of the right markers that you would benefit from this therapy. And because no testing involved, we just, send people their doses and again, clinically, it works pretty well.
And do they have a local clinic or something do the shot under the
You
tongue
do it at
every
home.
7 weeks?
Yeah,
Oh, so
because it's
they
not
learn
a
how to
shot.
do
You're
it.
just literally squirting it under your tongue. But again, I don't worry about anaphylaxis. It's never happened with LDA. So it's very
Yeah.
safe for people to do it at home.
Oh, remarkable. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, I've shared this with you before. I get to be with my tribe on the podcast, and it's just always uplifting. Uh, so anything you want to share that we didn't get to?
No, I think, if you're someone who's been struggling with allergies, and again, there's so much more to what I think allergy does to our body that we often don't think of. But if you've had any kind of chronic persistent symptom that hasn't gone away, it's something that should be looked at, because it might not be something that you've really even thought of that could be relating to some sort of allergic reaction. Because again, people kind of get hung up that, again, I don't get the itchy eyes or the sneezing or the scratchy throat, but I've had this chronic skin problem, this chronic GI issue, this chronic, chest congestion. There could be some underlying allergen that you just don't know about. And really, a lot of the neuropsychiatric stuff, again, most people wouldn't have any clue that it was some sort of allergen or mast cell activation that was causing that. And it's so easy to, go for the meds or even some of the supplements to try and help with my mood and my sleep and my cognition. And people are often surprised to find out there is some other underlying trigger that's setting that cascade off. And if we can stop that, again, you don't have to rely on all the pills and supplements to get you through.
Awesome. Now, there's a couple of things people might want to know about you. One is that you've got a masterclass, some content around this. So that'll be in the show notes if they want to connect about that.
Yeah, so this is actually a masterclass that we've done before, and we're going to relaunch it just because it's allergy season, and we want people to have that education to really be aware. I actually interviewed, dozens of experts around allergy, immunology, asthma, and so people have an opportunity to listen to all these different interviews of people I talked with. And again, we've got a lot of different strategies of different ways to help manage allergies.
And if people, yeah, thank you. If people want to, and then where do they find you if people want to connect with you and do some of the work that we described today?
Yeah, the best place is just my website, which is just Darin Ingels, ND, N as in Nancy D.com.
Super. Well, thanks for all the light you bring and sharing your wisdom today and all your commitment to healing.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Rob.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.